Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Artsbeat TV and radio here on Westfield Community Programming, Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and we're here to start today's program talking about a brand new performing arts center here in Western Massachusetts, in Florence, to be exact. And we have Cassandra, Holden, and Kyle Homestead from the Bombyx Center for Arts and in Florence, Massachusetts. And both of them are involved with Laudable Productions, which has produced a lot of great music and other kinds of arts events here up and down the valley, from programs at the Jazz Festival in downtown Springfield to other kinds of concerts. So it's great to have both of you on board. And Kyle, I haven't seen you in decades.
I know, it's amazing, but we seem to see each other via email.
That's right. So here we are. And Cassandra, we've not met before, but we've traded many emails. First of all, Bombyx is brand new. So tell me a little bit about it. The one thing that caught my attention is the fact that as you opened this brand new season of programming, two of the first artists to appear, one was Dee Dee Bridgewater, who's a well-known jazz singer, but she also won a Tony Award playing Glinda the Good Witch and the musical The Wiz. And the other was the trumpeter Terence Blanchard, who just weeks before performing in Hampshire County had premiered an opera at the Metropolitan Opera. He was the first African-American composer to be represented at the Met. So two big names, and they kind of launched your season. How did Bombyx get to be?
Well, that's a great question. But, interestingly, both of those artists, I would say one of the most rewarding aspects of presenting both of them was that they really connected on a personal level with the history of the building and of Florence, which is what really drew us into the project to begin with. I grew up in Florence and really was unaware of the incredible history that Florence has distinctly different from Northampton.
So in the early 19th century, Northampton was actually the more conservative town. There were many folks living there who had connections to Southern cotton and the plantations and the slavery that was used to power those plantations. And so a group of radical abolitionists broke off and founded Florence. They got together and they established the first cooperative silk mill in the country, as well as a sugar beet farm, because they were rejecting slave labor, not only in this country, but globally, and wanted to create a new economic model. Many of those folks who founded those industries later went on to establish the Florence Congregational Church, which also in its moment in 1861 was really radical in its thinking. They believed in gender equity at the time and gave women full voting rights. They were all for the abolition of slavery and equal rights for all of the Black citizens in this country. They also believed in religious tolerance, and there were no fewer than 9 congregations that came together to found that church 150 years ago. So it feels really good to be in that space. You can feel the energy and the sort of resonance of that history. And we learned about the property and this history a couple of years ago. And we're really interested in it. There's an older congregation that was really sort of struggling to, keep up this rather large property. And so, it seemed like a great fit, to form an art center that's also a spiritual center. That original congregation and Beta Hava, the Reform Synagogue, make their home there. There's a childcare center that's also part of the property. So you have these wonderful, multidimensional community aspects that then, only add to the arts programming that we're bringing.
And the two of you are essentially the curators of the arts programming. What made you choose the direction of jazz, and what are some of the genres that you plan to produce there?
Well, we have a history of producing a lot of what might be referred to as global music, if we need to put a genre on it. But we do a lot to bring artists from all over the world here, and both in our concert and festival programming. And we really wanted to build on that with jazz my beginnings in the music business go back to the Iron Horse, where I sort of had tenure for a decade, and remembering just so many of the incredible jazz moments that happened there. This was in the 80s and 90s, right? I'm sure you remember this. But we felt like the Valley, it was really time for to have a venue that could really put a stake in the ground around jazz and make the investment in that.
And jazz is also one of those genres that's been interpreted internationally as it's moved around the world. It's taken on these different inflections, and it's, for me, it's not different than our other programming where we're bringing in performers from around the world. It functions almost as a lens, right? You're seeing these different interpretations of that music as it relates to the musical experiences and traditions and educational experiences of the musicians who are bringing it to us.
Now, you've only been open a couple of months, really, and I know there was a planning period. So far, has the audience response and the community response met your expectations, or have you had to pivot in some of the things you wanted to do because of the pandemic?
We're still, I think everybody in the music industry is seeing very modest turnouts. Most artists who come through say, hey, most of the rooms that we play, we see about 50% of what we would expect in a non-COVID time. And that's what we hear from other presenters too. So given what's going on today, we've been really thrilled with the turnout. We've had fantastic audiences, all kinds of people who've been coming in saying, this is my first concert in 2 years. And I think moreover, people feel really safe and welcome in this space. So it's certainly meeting our expectations. And I think the experiences that artists have had in the room and that audiences have had in the room have really exceeded our expectations. It's just felt really good across the board.
How did it feel for the two of you? I mean, you've been involved in music and the arts for such a long time, and then we, like all of us, we couldn't attend performances. How did it feel to be in a room and hear live music and see musicians and audience interact after 2 years?
During the pandemic, early on, we pivoted and started doing all kinds of streaming programming. And we actually got an exemption from the state and produced a whole series of events out of the Academy of Music during lockdown, when there could be no audience there, and really kind of push the boundaries of what music can be in a virtual setting. So I think that while we've spent much of the pandemic working with artists on stages, what we haven't heard is the roar of applause, and just felt, we've seen the audience through Zoom, but we have not felt that energy. And so it's just amazing the joy that is expressed when an audience rises to their feet and just expresses their gratitude for having been whisked away into a musical moment. So it's been really stunning to hear audiences again.
Yeah, I
and
felt
also for audience members to reconnect with each other. Like at every show, there'll be a handful of people who say, I saw my neighbor, I saw my friend that I haven't seen in 2 years. Like there's that community reconnection piece that means so much to people.
I was very appreciative of the fact that so much was being streamed in all areas of the arts. The idea during the pandemic, the Metropolitan Opera was streaming a free opera every night from their repertoire. And these are things I never had the opportunity to see live, and it was cool. And to be able to see theater performances from theater companies around the globe was exciting. But as things pivoted this last summer and there were outdoor performances, it was great. But there was something about being indoors. In the middle of October, the musicians of the Springfield Symphony got together and put together a concert with their music director, Kevin Rhodes. And the excitement of the audience and the musicians interacting was something I didn't realize how much I had missed over 2 years.
Yeah.
So I personally just can't get enough of going to live shows now.
Yeah, yeah, it feels so good. And, we actually have some hybrid events coming up. Next week, we have Sweet Honey in the Rock, who, of course, has an international audience that adores them. And we will have a live audience, an in-person audience in the room, but we'll also be streaming that to an international audience at the same time. So people that aren't comfortable coming out have that option.
Yeah. What are some of the events and programs that you've got booked later on in December and going into the new year?
Boy, we've got so much exciting stuff. Coming up on December 10th, we're continuing a tradition at Bombyx called Barrio Night, but we really wanted to invite the neighbors. In fact, we have so many families that walk to Bombyx from their homes, which is lovely. And so we have this monthly event that is Bombyx Barrio Night, where everybody who lives in Florence gets to bring a guest for free. So that will be on December 10th, and that's Albino MB, who is an incredible guitarist, sort of fusion of West African and jazz, and he actually played at our Mill Pond Festival this summer, and audiences loved him, and he'll be back. We have Yemen Blues on December 18th, which is coming in a duo format. We put on Yemen Blues this summer outside, actually, at the church. We had a series of these outdoor concerts before we had launched Bombyx in the back lawn of the church, and that was a fantastic concert. So we're really excited to bring back Yemen Blues with special guest Midwood. And then on December 19th, we have Big Yuki, who is this incredible, sort of undescribable Japanese pianist who will be doing both an acoustic piano set on our fabulous piano, but also is well known for his really innovative work with synthesizers and such. And Big Yuki has performed a few different times for us, most recently at our Barbez in the Woods Festival. And is going to be coming up and actually spending a few days writing and rehearsing in the Valley before doing this special performance at Bombyx. So he'll be doing a solo set and then a set with his trio with two very different flavors. And he's incredible. If you haven't seen him, he tours with Kamasi Washington and all kinds of incredible people. And on December 29th, we have Rachel Eckroth, who just was Grammy nominated for her most recent album, The Garden, which is an incredible textural, it's sort of jazz. There's a little bit of electronica elements. She's this incredible composer, pianist, singer-songwriter. Again, music
both
that
she and Big Yuki are really sort of pushing the boundaries of jazz. Like, they're both really fascinating contemporary players who are taking that to a different space altogether. So we're excited to present both of them.
Yeah, and we'll be closing out the year on New Year's Eve with a special performance with Peter Blanchett and his European counterpart, Manet. And he is, of course, the sort of inventor, known internationally as the inventor of the arch guitar. But it'll be this beautiful evening of music filling the sanctuary with these two arch guitar masters. So we're very much looking forward to that.
He's local. I mean, he's one of those local artists that has a worldwide reputation.
Yes, and it's such a joy to have an opportunity to get him out, especially with his European partner, who I don't think they've played together in quite some time.
So how can people find out about your schedule and your program schedule? I know I tend to see, aside from press releases in my work role, and away from that, I tend to see most of your stuff on Facebook. But how can people learn more about Bombyx?
Yeah, well, the website is bombyx.live. So it's BOMBYX.live. And incidentally, Mark, do you know what a Bombyx is?
I was going to ask you. I mean, I do know because Cassandra told me several times. But you've got to tell me, because somebody asked me the other day, well, what does it mean? Is it like, is it a European word? What does it mean? And so here's your chance to tell the world.
Well, it's really, anybody with kids should take a minute and Google Bombyx. Bombyx mori is the genus of the silk moth, the domesticated silk moth that would have been brought from China to Florence in the early 1800s, as they went on this incredible sort of enterprising endeavor to change global commerce by producing silk to reject Southern cotton. So it's this silk moth that came, to live in these mills in Florence that silk comes from. But when you look at the creature, and there's a page on our website with a great photo, it is like a platypus. It is one of these creatures that is immediately fascinating to look at because it's made up of all these different parts that don't quite look like they were meant to go together. It's sort of cute and fuzzy and has these, white leg warmers, but it has these antenna combs that look very alien. It's a great creature to get to know.
And these big eyes, it looks like something out of anime. So I'm excited to invite, visual artists to interpret the Bombyx and, animate it, draw it, paint it, sculpt it, needle felt it, whatever comes to mind, because there's really a lot to work with there.
Okay, so you've got a website, and you're on Facebook, and I would assume some of the other social media. So we're about to take a break to acknowledge the underwriters that make Artsbeat possible here. So I encourage everybody, while we're taking that break, to go Google Bombyx Center for the Arts in Florence, Massachusetts. We come back after the break. We'll be talking more with Kyle Homestead and Cassandra Holden from Bombyx about some of the upcoming programs that they're working on right here in Western Massachusetts. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. I'm Mark Auerbach. If you've missed a part of today's program or you want to share it with your friends, it's available on WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. And after we acknowledge the underwriters, we'll be back with more Artsbeat, so don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Underwriting for WSKB's community radio programming is brought to you in part by R. Levesque Associates. They are offering landscape architecture, civil engineering, environmental permitting, and land surveying. RLA is a second-generation company devoted to excellence in the planning and design of outdoor spaces. On the web at rlaland.com or at 40 School Street in Westfield.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Beth's Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at betsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
Listen to me, Michael Buster McMahon, Mondays 8 to 10 a.m. to learn the stories behind your favorite songs. Or don't. I'm not the boss of you.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and Peter Coles is our chief engineer this morning. And we're with Kyle Homestead and Cassandra Holden from Laudable Productions, who are programming and producing a whole series of concerts at the brand new Bombyx Center for Arts in Florence, Massachusetts. They've really launched their debut season with some of the big names in global music, and it's one of the arts organizations that is brand new to the area, but certainly creating a lot of buzz. And so I want to ask you, both of you are involved with Laudable Productions, and Bombyx is just one of several projects and programs that you all do. What are some of the others?
Well, during the summer, we're pretty busy with our festivals. We produce the Mill Pond Live series over in East Hampton, which is a weekly concert series throughout the late summer and early fall. We also work on the Springfield Jazz and Roots Festival down in Springfield. And then up in Montague, we produce the Barbez in the Woods Festival, which is a delightful global music festival in this spectacular pastoral setting up there.
And we produce events in other places too. We just had a concert down at Gateway City Arts. We've got one coming up at Hawks and Reed. We're really excited for audiences to think of the Valley as this rich place to move around and have different arts experiences all over the Valley. And so we really like to encourage audiences, get up to Greenfield, go down to Holyoke, go down to Springfield. Don't just stay in one place.
And maybe one day you'll come to Westfield.
Yeah, well,
We would love
let's figure
to.
that out. We'd love to.
Yeah. Kyle, I know you were born and raised here. Cassandra, are you local to the area, or did you come here at some point?
Well, I grew up in Vermont, and then I moved here as a Smith student and fell in love with the area and made this my home. It's the right mix of, the beautiful scenery and being able to go hiking and kayaking and have access to the outdoors, which, was a big part of my childhood. But then you can also hop on the train and you can be in New York in a couple of hours, or you can be in Montreal or Boston and have access to all of the amenities and cultural experiences that big cities offer.
We talk about Western Massachusetts and the creative economy here, and the fact that we've got a great theater scene, a good music scene, and more people that are in the arts are choosing to work and live here. Since you're producing music all up and down the valley, what do you think is the attraction for musicians and craftspeople and artists? Why should they live and work here? It certainly worked for you. If somebody were saying to you, what kind of life could I have, and what kind of job and work could I carve out among the creatives, what are the opportunities here in Western Mass?
I think there's kind of a snowball effect. Like the more artists and musicians and creatives move here, the more opportunities they are. Certainly in our world, there are tons of opportunities in production, whether that's, in theater or in music, like the invisible work that goes into putting on shows, finding talent, bringing performers here. There's definitely that. I mean, I think of the street that we live on, and we have a filmmaker a few houses down. We have another neighbor who works on podcasts, another neighbor who's an organist, a couple of glass blowers. I mean, it's like we're everywhere. All of us who make things, we're everywhere. And it's great because if you need to know how to do something, for me, it's akin to like having a studio in one of these great buildings, like 1 Cottage Street or 221 Pine Street. Like I might not be a woodworker, but there's one down the hall who can make that thing for me. And this is sort of similar, that, I might not be a filmmaker, but I know one, and I could ask for some help with a project, or, video editing or audio engineering, like all of that's here. And that just helps everyone's projects be more successful.
I think there's also, we spend a lot of time making it possible to bring music here that we might not otherwise have in the Valley. And in fact, our partner, Ido Moore, who is responsible for a lot of our global music programming, he lived in New York for a long time and came here, lived here for 10 years with young kids and a family, and absolutely loved the Valley, but also felt like he didn't have access to some of those experiences. And that's the inspiration behind our Barbez in the Woods Festival, because Barbez is actually a little club in Brooklyn, which has music 365 days a year. But we have all kinds of artists that come here from New York, and some of them become real regulars, and they love coming to the Valley because of everything that the Valley has to offer. And a lot of them talk about wanting to move here. And so it's great that we're really lucky in this area to have an economy that will support the arts, that will support the kind of programming that we have here. And that's probably, that's unusual given the size of our population and so on. So we feel very grateful to the audiences who come out and support this music, these particularly like come out to support experiences that are new to them. Many of the artists that we present are not household names. They're not artists that people have seen before, but there's a real hunger for these kinds of cross-cultural experiences and to discover new things. And that's one of the best qualities, I think, of the audiences here in the Valley, is their desire to discover and experience new music, new theater, new kinds of arts.
People don't really understand often how much work it takes to produce a concert. Everything from setting up the chairs to making sure that the artist's needs get met to marketing the event, selling the tickets, and all of that good stuff. How much time do either of you have to go see what's happening on the music scene, either in Boston or New York, so you can import the things that are cutting edge and new?
You know, we call it stocking the pond. Every once in a while, we just have to go take off for a few days, go, whether it's, I mean, it could be going to MOSSO, it could be going to New York, you know, it's for us, it's more like re-energizing. It's drinking in other experiences that we haven't had, new experiences. It's not so much like surveying and going to showcases and that kind of thing. It's really much more of, in order to have a lot of creative output, you need to refuel and take in some creativity and be inspired. And we don't create enough of those opportunities for ourselves, but we really try to do that several times a year.
Yeah, it seems to me, I mean, I tend to go to New York to kind of get my theater vibe going, and I haven't really been able to go that much since the pandemic, but every once in a while I have to sneak off for 2 or 3 days of immersive things to figure out what might come here next. And oddly enough, in the theater scene, the theaters like Barrington Stage and Hartford Stage and Theater Works are actually producing the work now that's going to go to New York next year. So we're becoming an incubator here in Western Mass for the arts of all kinds that start out here or nurture here and then move on.
Absolutely. And, you know, over the past year, we've hosted, you know, a couple of different artist residencies where artists would come for a week or so, stay here, write, you know, maybe do, you know, a public performance and a workshop, but it's really a, you know, I think for a lot of artists living in urban areas, it was really powerful to be out in nature and to sort of escape the density of humanity in cities, if you will, you know, particularly with the concerns about COVID, like that just opened up a mental space to be able to, you know, to come here, to create new work, to have, you know, both the physical and creative pause, you know, to make new work. I think we all need that. And, you know, I look forward to encouraging more of those things as Bombyx moves along in its development plans. I'm hoping that we can really foster several of those kinds of retreats each year.
Will Bombyx be year round, or will it be primarily September through May?
It'll be year round.
So I would venture to say by the summertime, the two of you, between Bombyx and the East Hampton and the Franklin County performances and the Springfield Jazz Festival, you guys are going to be coasting on fumes.
Well, we also have a good team that, you know, that we've put together. So that's part of what makes it possible. And it's also important to remember that Bombyx is more than music. Certainly we've made a splash with our musical programming since we opened, but, you know, we're also hosting talks and exhibitions and workshops and, you know, dance performances. So, you know, it's not, you know, there are many different kinds of things that will be happening. And, you know, the other piece of Bombyx that's exciting is that we have outdoor space that we can activate in the summertime. So we're really, you know, all of the things.
Well, we're just about out of time. So before we run off, give people where can people find out about what Bombyx is doing through the month of December and going into the winter months?
Yeah,
sure.
Go right to the website.
Yes, bombyx.live. That's BOMBYX.live.
Or Facebook.
All of our shows are there. You can buy tickets. You can also read a little bit about the history of the property and the history of Florence, which is really critical.
Well, Kyle Homestead and Cassandra Holden from Bombyx, thanks for joining us this morning on Artsbeat. I'm going to make a journey up there one of these days. I want a tour and try to catch a
and
performance.
Bring us some theater.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. We're going to take a break to acknowledge our underwriters, and we'll be back with more Artsbeat, so don't go away.
Join us to Underwriting support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Greater Westfield Chamber of Commerce, the voice of business for the Greater Westfield communities. Informing, educating, advocating, the Chamber provides opportunities for members to make meaningful connections on local, regional, and state levels. For more information on the Chamber's many events, workshops, and programs, as well as the benefits of membership, visit westfieldbiz.org. The Chamber focuses on the most important economy, yours.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Beth's Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at betsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're going to spend the next half hour with the musicians of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, also known as MOSSO. Beth Welty, one of the violinists, Miho Matsuno, violinist, and Alexander Swenson, double bass player. The three of these musicians played with the Springfield Symphony Orchestra for a long time, and then, as most people know, the Springfield Symphony Orchestra went on hiatus in March of 2020 due to the pandemic, but never emerged. And there were labor negotiations between the musicians and the orchestra's management committee. Nothing materialized there, so the musicians formed their own non-for-profit organization and produced a concert, a series of small chamber concerts actually during the summer and early fall, but produced a full concert with the Springfield Symphony colleagues and Maestro Kevin Rhodes, their beloved conductor and music director, in October at Symphony Hall, which got a lot of community support. It sold out, and subsequent to that, the musicians have raised over $50,000 to produce more music throughout the area. This month, December 14th and 17th, there'll be two performances by the MOSSO chamber players, both in Longmeadow, and then in 2022, chamber music series in Westfield, Longmeadow, and other venues. So Beth and Miho and Alex, it's so good to have you here this morning. You've got so much news to share since that October 15th concert in terms of what you guys have produced as an arts organization and where you're moving forward. Beth, did you ever expect that as a musician you would be running an arts organization per se and doing everything from printing programs to newsletters to setting up chairs?
No, not at all. This has been quite a wild ride. But I have to say, I am so proud of this orchestra, how we have stuck together and worked together. And it's just amazing. There's sort of a core committee, but many of the other musicians have stepped up as well. And everybody seems to find their niche of what they're really good at. And like our principal horn is really great at setting up Eventbrite. And just everybody seemed to find their place where they could help the most. And I'm amazed at what we've been able to accomplish in such a short time.
And what I find fascinating is that the community has just gone behind you and supportive in every single way. I went to that concert October 15th, and it was like being at a rock show. I mean, people jumping up and long-standing ovations and people jumping up and down and carrying on. I have been to the symphony for years since I worked there when I was in my early 20s as the marketing director. I never saw over the years any kind of excitement like that. I was always afraid going to the symphony that if the audience stood up for a standing ovation, some of them would topple over. But these people were jumping over chairs and carrying on. It was a real thrill. I don't think will ever forget that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a standing ovation before we played one note. Just when Masako walked out to tune us, the place just erupted. And I agree, Mark, I've never played a concert like that. I will never forget that concert.
So, what made the musicians decide to form their own not-for-profit and move forward? It's kind of a unique situation. Alex, you've been in part of this from day one. What was the motivation behind it, and how difficult was it to get the musicians to fall into place and become a unified community?
Well, I think, for the musicians, we've always been a unified community. The Springfield Symphony is kind of like a family. And so, what we want to do is just get together and perform beautiful music and make music at the highest level. And we're, at the risk of being immodest, we're very good at it. And I think, as Beth said, we never imagined ourselves kind of taking the helm of an organization, but this was really born out of necessity. We saw that the Springfield Symphony Orchestra was not going to plan any activities for the fall when all orchestras across the nation are reemerging from the pandemic. It's a really wonderful time for music in general, coming back to the hall after missing it for so long. And we decided that we could not let our community flounder without classical music. We couldn't let them down in that way. And we saw that the Springfield Symphony wasn't doing anything, and really we felt that it was our duty to step up. And musicians across the orchestra have really thrown a lot of weight behind this effort, culminating in October 15th, but now going beyond into our chamber music series for the winter, into planning concerts for the spring, until we can get back on stage united with the symphony orchestra.
Yeah. Beth, let me backtrack here. I've seen articles in the paper that say that the Musicians Union founded MOSSO, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I know the Musicians Union has been helpful, but it's the musicians themselves that founded MOSSO. Is that correct?
That's right. It literally is the musicians of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra. And yes, we are union members, but local 171, which is the one we belong to with the American Federation of Musicians, did not start MOSSO. We started it. It is absolutely our organization, not the unions.
And Miho, you're doing a lot of keeping the database going and reminding people about meetings and all kinds of good stuff, which you've invited me to a couple of the meetings to attend. There've been support from the music community. MOSSO's received support from music around the place, including the musicians of the Boston Symphony, who made tell me about that contribution, because that's kind of unique.
I cried when I heard about that. I was absolutely astounded by their generosity and support. That was up there with the October 15th concert for me. Just the feeling of support and kindness and just and solidarity, from the BSO musicians. I mean, it was incredible. It's just incredible. And every day, we receive donations, and I just say thank you every day to those people who have given to MOSSO, and I continue to say thank you. It's been extremely gratifying and inspiring for us to keep moving on with our work as musicians, producing concerts of music.
I mean, the fact that the Boston Symphony Orchestra musicians out of their own pockets donated $10,000 to their colleagues is just an incredible gift. But there was the Giving Tuesday campaign a couple of weeks ago, and the hopes was from the notes that I have, to raise money so that one of the concerts next season could be, or next calendar year could be live streamed. And the hope... That got doubled. So that's really a good thing. Beth, tell us about the 2 upcoming concerts in Longmeadow.
So yeah, our assistant concert mistress, Marcia Harbson, has put together a concert with Boris. Oh gosh, now I'm blanking on Boris's last name. Sorry, Boris, one of our cellists. And her husband's going to play viola. Kirsten Lipkins, who's a dear friend of the orchestra, often subbed on oboe with us, and also was formerly the education director of the Springfield Symphony. And I'm sorry, I'm not remembering who the pianist is, but they've got this really lovely concert lined up with all kinds of music using those 5 instruments. And I guess it sold out. And I think they're trying to schedule another one, but I'm not sure if there's a second date scheduled yet.
Yeah, that one's people interested in that one. That's at the Longmeadow Adult Center, the brand new one on Maple Road in Longmeadow. You can certainly connect with them to see if they'll add a second performance. And then on Tuesday, the 14th, there's a big brass quintet event at St. Andrews in Longmeadow.
Yes, 7:00. If you go to our website, springfieldsymphonymusicians.com, you can get tickets there. I'm not sure how many tickets are left. We are limiting the capacity just for safety's sake. There will be no tickets at the door because everybody has to bring either a negative COVID test or a vaccination card. So for safety's sake, it's not going to be a big audience.
Well, I think right now, you did that at Symphony Hall as well. I mean, they reduced the capacity of Symphony Hall, which makes people more comfortable or feel more comfortable going to live performances at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break to acknowledge the underwriters that make Artsbeat possible here on Westfield Community Programming 15, now Southwick Community Programming as well, and 89.5 FM WSKB. If you've missed a part of today's program or you want to share it with friends or watch it again, you'll find it archived on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're talking with MOSSO musicians of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, Miho Matsuno, Alexander Swenson, Beth Welty, and we'll be right back.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Beth's Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at betsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
This is Ken Stomsky from Ken's Den on WCPC 15 and 89.5 FM, Tuesdays 8 to 10.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. And we're here with the MOSSO musicians. Somebody needs to turn down their volume a little bit. We're getting a little echo here. But we're here with the MOSSO musicians, musicians of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra. Alex, what does MOSSO mean? I know it's a music term.
Yeah, MOSSO is an Italian term. You know, much of musical terms, descriptive terms are in Italian or German, depending on the composer. But MOSSO is Italian for motion, and usually in context, it's something like more motion, moving forward. The music should accelerate a little bit and move forward. And we thought there was no better allegory for our mission, which is to move the Springfield Symphony Orchestra and move classical music forward into the future. So that's where MOSSO comes from. It's also a perfect acronym for musicians of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, it seems to work out very well. And MOSSO's getting a lot of recognition here. One of the things that people don't understand or don't realize is that being a musician at the Springfield Symphony Orchestra is not a full-time 40-hour-a-week career for any musician, and that most of the musicians in MOSSO and the symphony have to supplement the work that they get at the Springfield Symphony with other orchestras and other things, teaching and day jobs and things like that. So I'm really curious, and people ask me, well, what do they do when they're not at the Springfield Symphony? Well, start with Beth. How long have you been at the symphony, and where do you perform when you're not performing in Springfield?
Right. So first of all, I joined the orchestra right out of college, and you can figure out how old I am. That was 1983, so a long time. I've been in the orchestra, loved every minute of it. I actually live in Boston, and many of our musicians actually come from all over. We've got people from New York City. Miho comes from New York. Alex comes from Connecticut. We have people from Vermont. I mean, people come from all over to play in this orchestra because of its quality. But for me, so I do a lot of playing in the Boston area, different groups in the Boston area. I do teach. And so between a combination of performing and teaching, and I do play in a lot of other orchestras, so as do most of our musicians. So we have experience with other orchestras as well. There's a lot of what we call regional orchestras, which are not full-time, but if you do enough of them, you can kind of dovetail them and work out a schedule where you're playing. Most weekends you can end up playing a concert somewhere. Now that things are starting to get back to normal, we're finding that kind of schedule again.
I guess you're going to need an app to keep track of your schedules if you're doing so much work, right?
I like that. That's a good problem to have. Yeah.
Yeah. Alex, how did you get to Springfield, and what are some of the other things that you're involved in?
Yeah, I joined the Springfield Symphony in 2012 when I joined the section, the bass section, and then a few years later, the assistant principal seat, which is the second chair bass spot, opened up, and I auditioned and won that spot. So I've been with the symphony since 2012 in various positions. And as for other work, I pretty much do what Beth described. I dovetail other orchestras. I play in orchestras across the northeastern United States and Massachusetts, of course, Springfield, in Connecticut and Vermont and New Jersey and New York City. I play with opera companies. It can be a pretty busy schedule. And hopefully looking ahead when we come out of COVID. I also do a lot of private teaching, both virtually and in person in my studio, and I conduct a youth orchestra. So it's a little bit of a patchwork.
Yeah, how do you keep all of that together? I mean, if you add up the number of hours, you're working an 80-hour week.
Well, yeah, it depends on, it certainly depends on the week and depends on the number of hours of practice required. You know, a lot of people don't know when we come together with the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, for example, we're on a 3-day schedule. So we're rehearsing Thursday, Friday, and performing on Saturday. And, you know, you can't just pull out a Beethoven symphony and read it on Thursday afternoon. You've got to put in work, put in hours, weeks in advance to really prepare a program like that and be as prepared as you can possibly be individually so that when we come together, we can really make music. And that's the way for all orchestras.
Yeah, and Miho, you came. I know that we had talked before this program that you had gone to Mount Holyoke and you had actually attended the Springfield Symphony while you were in college. But how did you get to Springfield, and what other things do you do besides Springfield Symphony? And you need to unmute.
I did go hear the Springfield Symphony while I was a student at Mount Holyoke, and that was the inspiration for auditioning for Springfield Symphony Orchestra when there was a position open in the first violin section, and which I won back in 1992. So I've been with the orchestra since, and throughout the years, I've been a freelance musician, classical musician here in New York City. And about 10 years ago, I actually started working for an educational publishing company. And I've been a full-time editor there for about 10 years now. And but I kept my Springfield Symphony job. I just have a real love for the orchestra and for the people, and they're like my family. I hate to use that cliche, but for me it's not a cliche. It's the musicians are my family. So
Well, I've got to say from personal experience that I came to Springfield in the year before Beth joined the symphony. I was the marketing director for a couple of years and then moved on to a whole variety of other things. But the musicians that I met when I first came to Springfield, the symphony, Beth Welty, Marcia Harbison, Steve Perry, Glenn Mayer, some of them have been close personal friends ever since. So when MOSSO founded, they asked me for a little advice, and I've sort of been adopted as the non-musical person among the MOSSO family, and it really makes a big difference for me, and I appreciate that. We only have a few minutes, so we want to talk about the upcoming concerts. Beth, give us the rundown, and then Alex, I'm going to ask you how people that are interested in MOSSO can get more involved. So Beth, the upcoming 2 Longmeadow concerts are?
Well, like I say, and I'm sorry, I should have brought the program with me. I know it's a real variety of pieces, and I remember one of the pieces they're going to do, I believe, is the Bach Double Concerto for Oboe and Violin, which is a really great piece that Marcia and Kirsten will play that. And they just had this, I think the program might be up on our website. They have this whole real beautiful variety of different pieces using those 5 instruments. And I'm sorry I don't have the exact program in front of me, but I know it's going to be lovely. And Marcia, you may well know, for years ran the Longmeadow Chamber Music Society and is like one of the experts in just chamber music in general. She's produced hundreds of concerts over the years. So I know it's going to be great. I mean, she's really, tops at producing this kind of programming. And then for the brass concert's going to be amazing, I'm sure. So it is 3 of our MOSSO members. We've got Bob Hoyle on horn. We've got Brian Deal on trombone and Steve Perry on tuba. And these 3 guys also play in the Hartford Symphony. And unfortunately, our trumpet players were not available for this concert. So they're going to combine with their Hartford Symphony colleagues. And again, I'm sorry, I know one of the trumpet players is John Thomas. He's a friend of mine, so I know him. And whoever the other trumpet player is also in the Hartford Symphony. And they've put together this great program. It's all kind of holiday favorites. It's Hanukkah music, it's Christmas music. And I always think of brass as sort of being quintessential holiday music. And I think that it's going to sound terrific. And again, it's limited seating. So I would really urge people, if you're interested, if you want to hear a great brass concert, I would get onto our website and order your tickets because it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, and Steve Perry, the tuba player who's been on this program before, said that they were actually going to announce their program from the stage before they performed. But
right.
He shared some of it was traditional carols, some of it is Hollywood holiday music reinterpreted for brass. So it's really a family concert and certainly something that the kids would enjoy. And there are children's prizes for that as well.
Yes.
So, Alex, you're involved in MOSSO's steering committee and all that. If people want to get involved, either as contributors or volunteers, how do they reach out and what do they do? What kind of needs does the committee have at this point?
Yeah, we're a fledgling organization, so we're just getting off the ground. We've had huge swell of support since October 15th, and well before, and Giving Tuesday, as you mentioned. And that support is continued to be appreciated. So if people want to help out with either a donation or in-kind gifts, we do accept donations at our website. springfieldsymphonymusicians.com. There's also information about how to mail in a check if online donations don't work for you. And you can also consider giving in-kind services, venues. We love partnering with venues. If you can think of a natural partnership and you'd love to help out, please send us an email at springfieldsymphonymusicians at gmail.com. That's springfieldsymphonymusicians@gmail.com and springfieldsymphonymusicians.com. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/MOSSO Musicians, and we're on Twitter and Instagram at SSO Musicians. So we're kind of all over social media. If you want to get in touch, keep up to date on our activities, those are all great places to check.
And I noticed that you're getting a lot of press and publicity for the musicians. Beth, you're going to be on Mass Appeal pretty soon, and all the major newspapers and other venues have talked with various musicians. So if somebody comes to the concerts December 14th or 17th, they'd actually get to meet some of the musicians in person.
Yeah,
yes, and I think that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, and I think that's part of what we want is we want to be out in the community. We want to do the outreach. And I think we are very approachable. Please come talk to us because we're so passionate about this and we want to bring in as many people as we can.
Okay. Miho, do you have any final words for us today?
First of all, Mark, I just want to thank you for inviting us to your show. This has been really a real treat for us. And I would like for everyone watching or listening to find out more about MOSSO and support us if you would. We are, like Beth said, very passionate about what we do, and we want to have symphonic classical music in Springfield and in the Pioneer Valley. And we want to provide that for as long as we possibly could. So thank you all.
Well, thanks for joining us all today. This wraps up another Artsbeat. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. We've been talking with MOSSO musicians Beth Welty, Miho Matsuno, and Alexander Swenson. The performances upcoming December 14th and 17th in Long Meadow. And in the new year, look for a series of chamber music performances in Long Meadow and in Westfield. And Guy McLean will announce the Westfield chamber music performances on an upcoming edition of Athenaeum Spotlight here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, 89.5 FM WSKB, and Southwick Community Programming. Best of luck with your performances to the three of you. Can't wait to see you. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. We'll see you next week with another edition of Artsbeat.
You girls. I've got eyes to see with.
Thanks to Optrix, the eye lotion made with science.
Ears to hear with.
Thanks to Benzel, the nasal spray made with amphetamines. Wow!
Arms to hug with, lips to kiss with.